At a glittering Charleston dinner party, my father, a celebrated professor, stood up, wine glass raised, and sneered, "She's no hero, she's just playing soldier." My mother's cold laugh cut deeper. "She'll mop floors at some base, shaming our name." My brother, the family's pride, scoffed, "Don't tarnish our legacy." The room exploded in cruel laughter, their mocking eyes piercing me like knives. Humiliated, I gripped my glass, heart pounding, and roared, "You'll beg for my forgiveness one day." I stormed out, their jeers ringing in my ears. "I'm Emily Carter. I'm 20 years old." That night, I vowed to make them eat their words. The sting of that Charleston dinner party still burned as I walked through the polished oak doors of our family's waterfront mansion. I was 14, living in a house that screamed perfection. My father, Richard Carter, a towering history professor at the College of Charleston, ruled our home like a courtroom. My mother, Dr. Susan Carter, a marine biologist with icy precision, mapped ocean currents with the same cold focus she used to judge me. Failure wasn't an option, it was a sin. Our dining room table wasn't for meals, it was a stage for scrutiny, where every report card was dissected like evidence. My room, once a sanctuary for my kayak paddles and wilderness guides, had been stripped bare. By 8th grade, it was a prison of laminated charts, Harvard posters, and a whiteboard ranking our family's achievements. My name? Always dead last, scratched in red marker below my brother Nathan's gilded record. Nathan was their son, valedictorian, national debate champion, Senate intern by 19. At 6 feet tall, with a politician's smile, he was the Carter legacy personified. Me? I was the smudge on their canvas, the girl who'd rather climb Sullivan's Island cliffs or study first aid manuals than chase SAT scores. One night, I made the mistake of bringing a wilderness survival book to dinner. Susan snatched it, her nails clicking like a judge's gavel. "This garbage won't get you into Yale," she snapped, tearing the pages in front of Nathan's smirk. Richard leaned back, his voice dripping with disdain. "Emily, you're our failed experiment. Nathan's the blueprint." Their words carved into me, sharper than any knife. I fled to the bathroom, locking the door, staring at my reflection in the dim light. Tears streamed down my face as I whispered, "Am I nothing?" Every night, I'd trace the 3-mile path along the Battery, running until my lungs burned, trying to outrun their judgment. But no matter how fast I ran, I couldn't escape the truth. In the Carter house, I was invisible, a ghost in their perfect world, suffocating under expectations I'd never meet. The weight of my family's judgment clung to me like damp Charleston air, but at 17, I stumbled into a moment that cracked open the cage of my life. It was spring, and the high school gym buzzed with a career fair, rows of predictable booths hawking banks, tech startups, and medical schools. My mother, Susan, had circled the pre-med table in red ink on my schedule, her voice echoing in my head, "Yale or nothing, Emily." I dragged my feet past the glossy pamphlets, my heart sinking under the pressure to be someone I wasn't. Then, in the far corner, I saw her, Staff Sergeant Lisa Bennett, standing tall in army green, a jagged scar tracing her left cheek like a battle-worn badge. Her booth was sparse, just a folded flag and a medic's patch, but her presence cut through the chaos like a beacon. I don't know why I stopped. Maybe it was the way her eyes held steady, unflinching, or the quiet power in her stance. She didn't pitch college funds or sign-up bonuses. Instead, she leaned forward, her voice low and fierce. "Saving a life in a hospital is one thing," she said. "But pulling a soldier from a burning wreck, stitching a wound under gunfire, that's a calling. I've held men's hands as they took their last breath, and I've brought others back from the edge. No regrets." Her words hit me like a shockwave, igniting something deep in my chest. For the first time, I saw a path that wasn't paved with Ivy League logos or my brother Nathan's trophies. I saw myself, running toward danger, not away, saving lives where it mattered most. Trembling, I signed up for an Army info session, my hands shaking as I scribbled my name. That night, I made the mistake of telling Susan. I found her in her study, surrounded by ocean charts and awards. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "I met a soldier today. I want to be a combat medic. Her face twisted, and before I could blink, her hand cracked across my cheek. The sting was nothing compared to her words. A medic, she hissed. You're too weak to survive basic training, let alone a war. You'll humiliate us. Nathan, lounging in the doorway, laughed sharply. Give it up, Emily. You'd faint at the sight of blood. My father, Richard, stormed in, his voice booming. No daughter of mine will throw her life away on some foolish fantasy. I'm locking your laptop tonight. No more of this nonsense. I staggered to the backyard shed, my cheek burning, my vision blurred with tears. Collapsing against a stack of old kayaks, I clutched the torn survival manual I'd hidden from Susan's wrath. Why won't they let me be me? I sobbed, my voice breaking in the dark. But Lisa's words echoed louder than their cruelty. I wiped my face, my resolve hardening. Under the cover of night, I started running, 5 miles along the moonlit battery, my sneakers pounding the pavement, my breath ragged but defiant. I hid my training gear in a duffel under the shed, sneaking out to practice first aid knots and study medic protocols on a stolen library book. Every step, every page, was a rebellion against the Carters' perfect plan. I wasn't their failure anymore. I was becoming something they could never understand. The spark Staff Sergeant Lisa Bennett ignited in me at 17 had grown into a fire by the time I turned 20, but it flickered under the suffocating weight of my family's expectations. I'd spent 3 years running secret 5-mile loops along Charleston's battery, hiding first aid manuals in the backyard shed, and dreaming of becoming a combat medic. But to pursue that dream, I had to break free from the path the Carters had carved for me. I'd enrolled at Clemson University on a partial scholarship, a compromise to appease my parents, Richard and Susan. They saw it as a stepping stone to medical school, a way to salvage their failed experiment. I saw it as a prison. Every lecture hall felt like a noose tightening around my neck. Biology classes dragged on, filled with formulas I didn't care about, while my mind replayed Lisa's words, saving lives under gunfire, not in sterile labs. After one semester, my grades were slipping, and my heart was screaming. I couldn't live their lie anymore. I had to tell them I was quitting college to enlist in the Army. It was a humid December evening when I returned to our waterfront mansion, the air thick with the scent of marsh and magnolias. The dining room glowed under a chandelier, its crystal prisms casting judgmental shadows. Richard sat at the head of the table, his history book stacked like a throne. Susan, her marine biologist's precision evident in her folded hands, stared at me with thinly veiled disappointment. Nathan, now a rising star at a Charleston law firm, lounged in his chair, his tailored suit a silent boast of his success. I clutched my enlistment papers, the edges damp from my sweating palms, and took a deep breath. I'm not going back to Clemson, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. I'm enlisting in the Army. I'm going to be a combat medic. The room froze. Then Richard's fist slammed the table, rattling the china. You're an embarrassment to the Carter name, he roared, his face crimson. Quitting college to play soldier? You'll be the laughingstock of Charleston. Susan's eyes narrowed to slits, her voice slicing like a scalpel. You're no daughter of mine if you choose this disgraceful path. Medics? You'll be scrubbing floors at some godforsaken base. Nathan leaned forward, his smirk venomous. You're a failure, Emily. Always have been. These papers? He snatched the enlistment forms from my hands and tore them in half, tossing the pieces into a silver trash bin by the table. They're as worthless as you are. Don't call me your brother when you're begging for scraps. The air left my lungs. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, scrambling to gather the shredded papers. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Their words were bullets, each one piercing deeper than the last. I stood, clutching the torn fragments, my voice raw. You think I'm nothing? I'll show you. I'll make the world know my name, and you'll choke on your words. Richard pointed to the door, his voice low and final. Get out. If you leave for the Army, you're dead to this family. Susan turned away, her silence sharper than any scream. Nathan laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed as I stumbled into the night. A storm was rolling in, thunder rumbling over Charleston Harbor. Rain pelted my face as I walked the 2-mile path to the bus station, my backpack heavy with the few belongings I'd grabbed, a change of clothes, my hidden first aid manual, and a dog-eared photo of me kayaking at 15, before the Carters tried to erase who I was. Lightning cracked the sky, illuminating the enlistment papers I'd taped back together, now smudged but unbroken. On the bus to Fort Benning, Georgia, I stared out the window, the city lights fading into darkness. My heart was a wreckage of grief and fury. They hadn't just rejected me, they'd severed me from their world. But as the miles stretched between us, I felt a strange clarity. This wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about becoming the person I'd always been, the one they'd tried to bury. I whispered to the rain-streaked glass, "I'm not your failure anymore." The rain-soaked bus ride from Charleston to Fort Benning, Georgia, left me hollow, the taped-together enlistment papers in my backpack a fragile reminder of my defiance. At 20, I'd walked away from the Carter family's waterfront mansion, their words, embarrassment, failure, dead to us, cutting deeper than the storm that drenched me. But as the bus rolled into the dusty sprawl of the Army base, a spark flickered in my chest. This was my chance to become the combat medic I'd dreamed of since meeting Staff Sergeant Lisa Bennett 3 years ago. The Carters had tried to bury me, but here, I'd rise, or break. Fort Benning was a crucible. The moment I stepped off the bus, a drill sergeant's voice cracked like a whip. "Move it, recruits. You're not at a Charleston tea party." My duffel hit the dirt, and I sprinted to formation, heart pounding. Basic training was relentless, 6-mile runs at dawn with 50-pound packs, crawling through mud under barbed wire, and mastering trauma care in mock battles where instructors screamed, "Faster, or your buddy's dead." My hands, once calloused from kayaking, now blistered from rifle drills. The Carters' voices haunted me, Nathan's sneer, "You'd faint at the sight of blood," but I pushed harder. One grueling day, I collapsed after a 10-mile march, my legs screaming. A fellow recruit, a wiry kid from Texas, pulled me up. "You got this, Carter," he said. "Don't let them win." I nodded, wiping sweat and tears, and kept going. I passed every test, physical, medical, mental, on my first try. By week 8, I'd memorized hemorrhage protocols and could apply a tourniquet in 20 seconds flat. My instructors noticed. One, a grizzled sergeant, barked during a field exercise, "Carter, you've got steady hands. Don't waste em." For the first time, I felt seen, not as the Carter family smudge, but as someone who could save lives. Graduation came, and I stood in my crisp uniform, a combat medic's patch on my sleeve. I sent a photo to my parents, hoping for a flicker of pride. The text I got back from Susan was ice cold, "Don't contact us again." My heart sank, but I straightened my shoulders. Fort Benning had forged me. I wasn't theirs anymore. 6 months later, at 22, I deployed to a forward operating base near Jalalabad, Afghanistan. The desert was a world of extremes, 120-degree heat, sand that stung like needles, and a constant hum of danger. My unit, part of the 101st Airborne, was a rough mix of grunts and medics, their curses and laughter a stark contrast to Charleston's polished silence. I treated everything from heatstroke to shrapnel wounds, my med bag a lifeline in the chaos. One night, a rocket attack shook the base. Sirens wailed as I sprinted to a smoking Humvee, its driver trapped inside, blood pooling from a mangled leg. Bullets snapped overhead, but I crawled through the wreckage, my hands steady as I applied a chest seal and started fluids. "Stay with me," I shouted, my voice cutting through his screams. We got him to the medevac chopper, his pulse faint but alive. That wasn't the worst. 3 months in, our base faced a coordinated assault, RPGs, mortars, and insurgents breaching the perimeter. I was in the aid station when the call came. A squad was pinned down 300 yards out, 3 soldiers critical. I grabbed my gear and ran, dodging tracer rounds, the air thick with smoke and the stench of burning fuel. One soldier, barely 19, lay in the dirt, his abdomen torn open. I knelt beside him, pressing gauze into the wound, my gloves slick with blood. "You're going home, kid," I whispered, though his eyes were fading. I worked frantically, tourniquets, IVs, bandages, while insurgents closed in. Captain James Holt, my CO, appeared through the haze, firing cover. "Carter, you're a damn machine," he yelled. "Keep them alive." We dragged the wounded to a Black Hawk, my arms burning, my uniform soaked in blood and sweat. All 3 survived, barely. Back at base, Holt handed me a bottle of water, his face grim but proud. "You've got guts, Doc Carter," he said. "They're calling you the Angel of Jalalabad." I managed a weak smile, but the weight of those lives clung to me. I'd saved them, but the Carters' rejection still gnawed. They didn't know I was here, running toward gunfire, becoming the person they'd never see. Each night, I checked the mail tent, hoping for a letter, a sign they cared. Nothing came. Yet, in the dust and chaos, I found my place. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, proving to myself what my family refused to believe. The desert dust of Jalalabad coated my boots, my med bag, my very soul, but it couldn't bury the ache that lingered from Charleston. At 22, I'd become Doc Carter, the Angel of Jalalabad, saving lives under gunfire and earning the respect of my unit in the 101st Airborne. I'd pulled soldiers from burning wrecks, stitched wounds amid rocket attacks, and earned Captain James Holt's nod of approval. Yet, the weight of my family's rejection, Richard's roar, Susan's cold dismissal, Nathan's venomous smirk, pressed harder than any 50-pound pack I'd carried through Fort Benning. I'd hoped my actions in Afghanistan might reach them, that the girl they called up failure could finally be seen. But hope, like water in the desert, was a cruel mirage. It started with a rare quiet evening at our forward operating base, the air heavy with 110-degree heat. After a grueling 12-hour shift treating shrapnel wounds, I sat in the comms tent, the satellite phone's static crackling like my fraying nerves. I dialed home, my heart pounding with a fragile wish to share a piece of my world. Susan answered, her voice as sharp as ever. "Emily, why are you calling?" she snapped. I swallowed hard, my words trembling. "Mom, I saved 3 soldiers last week. One was 19, gut wound, but he's going home because of me." Silence stretched, then her reply cut like a blade. "Don't bother us with your war stories. Nathan just closed a $1 million case. That's real success. You're not part of this family anymore." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my chest tightening as if the air had been sucked from the tent. The next blow came days later. A care package arrived for every soldier in my unit, letters, candy, socks, photos from loved ones. My bunk stayed empty. I checked the mail tent daily, my boots kicking up sand as I searched for a sign from Charleston. Nothing. Then, a letter slipped through, not from my parents, but from a family friend. Tucked inside was a clipping from a Charleston newspaper, a glowing feature on Nathan's latest legal victory. Scrawled in Susan's precise handwriting was a note, "This is what matters. You chose to be nothing." My hands shook as I unfolded another paper, a Carter family Christmas invitation, gold embossed, listing Richard, Susan, and Nathan. My name was gone, erased as if I'd never existed. The friend's letter explained the final cut. Richard had removed me from the family trust, declaring me no longer a Carter at a holiday gala. I stumbled to my tent, the desert stars blurring through tears. Collapsing onto my cot, I pulled out the dog-eared photo from my kayaking days, the one I'd carried since leaving home. It was creased, faded, but it held the girl I used to be, before the rankings, the torn books, the disownment. I tore it in half, the rip echoing like a gunshot in my heart. "You're right," I whispered to the empty tent. "I'm nothing to you." The pain was a living thing, clawing at my insides. I'd faced insurgents 300 yards from safety, but this betrayal was a wound no tourniquet could stop. For the first time, I questioned everything. Was saving lives worth this emptiness? Could I keep running toward gunfire when my own family had aimed at my heart? The next morning, I sat alone in the chow hall, pushing cold Marie's around my plate. A private, his arm bandaged from a wound I'd treated, slid into the seat across from me. "Heard you're the angel, Doc," he said, his drawl soft. "That kid you saved? He's got a daughter waiting. You're why he'll see her." His words were a lifeline, pulling me from the abyss. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The Carters had erased me, but here, in this sun-scorched hell, I was vital. I tucked the torn photo into my pocket, not as a memory, but as a reminder. Their rejection didn't define me. My hands, steady under fire, did. As I walked back to the aid station, the desert wind howled, but I stood taller. I wasn't nothing. I was Doc Carter, and I'd keep fighting, for the soldiers, for myself. The scars of Jalalabad, both the ones on my skin and the ones carved by my family's rejection, had hardened me by 24. I was Doc Carter, the angel of Jalalabad, a combat medic who dragged soldiers from death's grip under insurgent fire. The Carter family's erasure, their Christmas invitation without my name, and Susan's scrawled note calling me nothing, still stung, but I'd found purpose in the blood and dust of Afghanistan. I'd saved lives, earned Captain James Holt's respect, and carried the weight of my unit's trust. Yet, nothing prepared me for the call that came one sweltering morning in 2024, as I cleaned my med bag after a 15-hour shift. The voice on the satellite phone was crisp, official. "Specialist Carter, this is Lieutenant Colonel Ellis. Hold for General McMillan." My stomach lurched. The general's tone was direct. "You're being awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for your actions during Operation Desert Fang. You saved 10 soldiers and relayed intel that stopped a terrorist attack on U.S. soil. The President will present it at the White House next week." I gripped the phone, my voice barely a whisper. "Sir, is this real?" He chuckled. "No mistake, Carter. You crawled 100 yards under heavy fire, took a bullet graze to the shoulder, and saved a VIP. My brother was among the 30 hostages you freed. America owes you." I stood frozen, the desert heat forgotten. My actions had saved the President's brother. The world was about to know my name. A week later, I stood in the East Room of the White House, my dress uniform stiff, the weight of the moment heavier than any pack I'd carried. The room gleamed with chandeliers and history, filled with dignitaries and 3 other medal recipients, a Marine who'd lost an arm, a pilot who'd crashed saving civilians, a SEAL who'd disarmed a bomb. I scanned the crowd, my heart sinking. Richard, Susan, and Nathan were there, seated in the back, their faces unreadable. I'd sent them a curt email, "White House, next Thursday, 2 p.m. Come if you want." Susan's reply was a single line, "We'll try to make it." No pride, no apology, just obligation. The ceremony began, the announcer's voice booming. "Specialist Emily Carter, for extraordinary heroism in Operation Desert Fang." My boots echoed on the marble as I stepped forward. The President, his eyes warm but solemn, pinned the Distinguished Service Cross to my chest. He leaned in, his voice low. "My brother's alive because of you, Emily. My family will never forget this." My throat tightened, but I held my salute, steady as stone. He addressed the room, his voice rising. "Specialist Carter braved relentless enemy fire, sustained a wound, and transmitted coordinates that saved 30 hostages and prevented a catastrophic attack on American cities. She is the best of us." The crowd erupted, a standing ovation that shook the walls. I glanced at my family. Richard stared at his shoes, Susan clutched her purse, Nathan scrolled his phone. They didn't clap. They didn't stand. Their silence was louder than the applause. As I stepped back, my shoulder throbbed where the bullet had grazed me, a reminder of the 100-yard crawl through sand and chaos, dragging a wounded officer while insurgents closed in. I'd patched his artery, called in the airstrike, and held his hand until the chopper came, all while my own blood soaked my sleeve. That day, I'd been everything the Carters said I wasn't: brave, vital, unbreakable. Yet, their blank faces in that gilded room cut deeper than any wound. Susan leaned toward Richard, whispering, "Nathan's got a deposition tomorrow. We should leave soon." My eyes burned, but I refused to let a single tear fall. I'd faced death in Jalalabad. I'd saved the president's brother. Their approval was a ghost I no longer chased. The ceremony ended, and the crowd milled around, shaking hands, snapping photos. A general approached, his stars glinting. "Carter, you're a hell of a soldier," he said. "Keep making us proud." I nodded, my voice steady. "Yes, sir." But inside, a truth settled like stone: the Carters would never see me. Not as Doc Carter, not as the woman who'd changed history. I stood tall, the metal cold against my chest, and made a silent vow. This wasn't their victory. It was mine. And I'd carry it forward, with or without them. The Distinguished Service Cross hung heavy on my chest as I left the White House, its weight a reminder of the lives I'd saved and the family who'd refused to clap. At 24, I was Doc Carter, the angel of Jalalabad, forged in the crucible of Afghanistan and honored by the president himself. Yet, the Carters, Richard, Susan, and Nathan, had sat stone-faced, their silence a final rejection after years of calling me a failure, erasing me from their Christmas cards, and striking me from their trust. I'd vowed to move forward without them, but a part of me still ached for a bridge across the chasm they'd built. 2 months later, I was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, running rehab drills for wounded soldiers, when an unannounced visitor appeared at the training field. Richard Carter stood there, no longer the towering professor, but a man in a wrinkled jacket, his eyes uncertain. "Emily," he said, his voice cracking, "I need to see where you work." I hesitated, then led him through the medical bay, past trauma simulators and posters of triage protocols. A staff sergeant, his leg in a brace I'd fitted, saluted me. "Doc Carter, you're a lifesaver," he said. Richard's gaze softened, a flicker of something new, regret, maybe pride. In my office, he sank into a chair, hands trembling. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I called you a disgrace, but you're the hero I never was. Forgive me, Emily." That evening, a package arrived from Susan. Inside were bandages, a first aid kit, and a faded photo of my grandfather in his World War II uniform, his medic's armband prominent. A note in her precise script read, "Your grandfather saved lives, like you. I was terrified of losing you, so I pushed you away. I'm so proud, Emily." My eyes stung, but the dam held. Nathan called the next week, his voice stripped of its usual arrogance. "I'm volunteering at a veterans clinic," he said. "I see what you do now. I want to be a brother you can count on." I didn't reply, but my heart shifted, a crack in the armor I'd built. I returned to Charleston for Thanksgiving, the 300-mile drive a journey through memories of pain. The waterfront mansion looked smaller, its polish dulled. At dinner, a new shadow box hung beside Nathan's law degree, my Distinguished Service Cross, framed with a photo from the White House. Susan reached for my hand, her eyes wet. "You're our light, Emily," she said. "We were blind too long." Richard raised a glass, his voice steady. "To Emily, our hero." For the first time, I felt home, not as a failure, but as a daughter, a sister, whole. The shadow box in my family's Charleston dining room, holding my Distinguished Service Cross beside Nathan's law degree, was a quiet victory, but it wasn't the end of my story. At 24, I stood in the rehab center at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, surrounded by soldiers relearning to walk, to breathe, to live. I was Doc Carter, the angel of Jalalabad, no longer the girl Richard and Susan Carter had called a failure, no longer erased from their Christmas cards. Their apologies, Richard's trembling confession, Susan's tearful embrace, Nathan's humbled call, had mended a wound I'd carried since that humiliating dinner party at 20. But the real triumph wasn't their recognition. It was the lives I'd saved, the purpose I'd forged in the 120-degree heat of Afghanistan, and the strength I'd found when my family turned their backs. I walked through the rehab bay, my boots echoing on the polished floor, and paused by a young private, his legs scarred from an IED. He gripped my hand, his voice rough. "Doc Carter, I'm running a 5K next month because of you. You didn't just fix my leg, you gave me hope. His words hit like a desert sunrise, warm and piercing. I'd crawled 100 yards under gunfire, taken a bullet graze, and saved the president's brother, but this moment of giving a soldier back his fight, was why I kept going. The Carters' approval was a bonus, not my anchor. My worth wasn't tied to their applause or their waterfront mansion. It was in the soldiers who'd see their kids again, in the hands that stayed steady when the world burned. So, here's what I've learned, and I want you to hear it. Your value isn't defined by who rejects you, whether it's family, friends, or the world. It's in the choices you make when no one's watching, the moments you run toward the fire instead of away. You don't need a medal to matter, just one act of courage, one life you touch. When they call you a failure, keep running your 5-mile path, like I did along Charleston's battery. When they erase you, show up anyway. You are enough. I'm Emily Carter, and I'm still here, teaching medics, saving lives, not for applause, but because it's who I am. If my story stirred something in you, share yours in the comments. What's the moment you proved them wrong? Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's keep these stories alive. Your voice matters, don't let anyone tell you otherwise.